Thanks for joining us on I Met Jesus. This is where we are exploring the lives of some people in Scripture who encounter Jesus Christ and they walk away changed one way or another. You can't be neutral when you encounter Christ. We hope that you learn a lot from the podcast, and we hope that it challenges you and what your encounter with Christ is like as well.
Welcome into the Crossroads Podcast. And I just want to point out one thing. Today, we're going to go with Mary and Martha and Lazarus. We have a lot of ground to cover. But if you ever wonder when the podcast starts, it feels like you've joined us in the middle of a conversation.
Because you have.
Yes. And there are inflammatory sports opinions getting thrown around and all kinds.
Cowboys going to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah. And ridiculous statements like that are what gets said.
A unicorn gave birth to a leprechaun.
It's so bizarre, like the juxtaposition.
You should have just said he's so bizarre.
That is true. I think there's something else in that cup. Not totally sure.
It's coffee.
It's coffee with black pepper and
cayenne pepper.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Some black pepper and nutmeg over there.
All right, we can go a couple of different directions today. I'm sure that we will. Where would you guys like to start? Wes, where would you like to start?
I'd like to start in Luke chapter 10.
At the beginning.
At the beginning.
Of the verses that you prepared for today.
Yes, that's where I'd like to start. I have no nonsense prepared.
Okay.
You have
great.
Zero nonsense? How many days have we worked since the last nonsense?
Minutes.
Okay. Good.
Minutes.
Just keeping track. You know how like some jobs have like how many days since the last injury?
Yes.
Ours is how many minutes since the last nonsense?
I could see that.
We're like at 1 minute since last nonsense.
Yeah, ours is closer to 30 seconds. Right before we hit record.
Yes. All right. Let me co-sign that. If you don't get to hear the other conversations, only one other person is in the room for this. But
it's just crazy.
Fairly
one thing I will say is I'm accompanied by two guys today just wearing sports shirts and jerseys from overrated sports teams today. So
wait.
It's too soon, Wes. It's too soon.
How was that?
I'm still upset about what happened in the Final Four when Duke
We
was
are less
clearly
than
the
2
better
years
team.
away
Yeah.
from winning a World Series.
It's true.
For the first time in
Giving me a
franchise history.
History lesson. Anyway,
Listen,
Luke
they are
chapter
almost as good as the Savannah Bananas at this point.
10.
They just hired a new
I love
city.
baseball.
I want to
And
know
I
why
love
you
fun.
guys aren't covering the biggest sports story that
Is this going to be about the PBR?
has happened
No, it's worse than that.
in the last decade.
Wow.
80,000 people
Gathered.
to watch baseball and weren't bored. Like that happened recently, and I don't think it's being covered enough.
Do you not, Jason? How often do you get to listen to the entirety of the program? Because if you were always listening to the program, you would know that for the not last 1, but 2, but 3 weeks, we have done stories about the Savannah Bananas and them selling out football stadiums,
There you go.
having a waiting list.
That's right. Could you tell me? Did you say something? Just say Scott Harris. The Savannah Bananas is baseball.
Is that true?
I just need you to say that.
Scott Harris of the Savannah
No,
Bananas.
he's not of this, so that
Oh.
would even better, though.
That would be.
He's their biggest fan, number one fan.
Scott Harris, you know it, I know it. The Savannah Bananas are baseball.
Cut the podcast.
We peaked
We're
right
done.
there.
We're done. Oh, my
Might have
goodness.
to edit this one more than usual.
There's
All right.
there's a lot of
Luke
inside jokes
chapter
to
10.
that. But yeah, let's you're gonna pivot us back.
I'm just going to read the text. That's all we're going to do.
Okay.
And then you want to introduce us to those people after I read the text or before? Here we go. This is the trend on the podcast. I'm going to read, and Jason's like, before that.
Yeah, well, just to make sure. We say these names a lot. You know, Mary, Martha, Lazarus. Do we know who these people are at all? And there's not a whole lot of information I want to give now because we're going to unpack a lot of it as we go. But did you have any idea who these people? Most people have heard these names, but they may not know. Like there's several Marys in the Bible.
Yeah, and Mary and Lazarus more than Martha.
Right. So you're going to have Mary and Martha, their sisters. Their brother is Lazarus. They're personal friends of Jesus, which is kind of cool. Like when you we think about Jesus so much in the form of like deity and God, but also just like a dude who like comes to your house and hangs out is a really amazing picture when you're like thinking about a God who's relational and close to us. They're going to be mentioned 3 different times throughout Scripture. We're going to cover 2 of those, and the third one is really just another meal where he's just hanging out with them and some cool stuff's happening. They're kind of honoring Jesus. And then there's Lazarus, and I don't mean for this to be a spoiler. He's going to be the dead guy in the story, but some cool stuff happens for him. One of the things that was interesting in this is that he is probably the sole provider in this first century city for his sisters, like most likely. So his death means possible poverty for them and lots of other things. So like what's going to happen in the story is going to restore a lot for them, including protection and provision and all that kind of stuff. And so it's a kind of a really neat deal. And then after he dies, but he also raises up.
Man, stop spoiling
I don't mean to be a spoiler guy. It is not a new story. I'm going to go ahead and say that. It's like those people that get freaked out when you're like, hey, do you know what happened in, what's the Bruce Willis movie? Sixth Sense. And they're like, don't tell me. And like, it's been on for like 25 years. Like, get over it.
I think it's more like 35 now.
Yeah, maybe. But like, this is 2,000 years. If you don't know, it's really kind of on you. But Lazarus is going to come
Or maybe you're listening to a podcast called I Met Jesus, and you're finding out about this story.
Yeah.
Well, a dead guy's going to come back to life today.
And it's not Jesus yet.
And then he just goes home and hangs out with his sisters. Like, that's what we kind of know. There's some other things I can tell you about theories of what happens to him after this, and we'll talk about that at the end.
That's what we call a tease.
There's your introduction.
Business. Thank you.
Oh, wow. After the 8 weeks we've been doing this, Wes is going to use words like in the business.
Wow. Well, one thing I will teach you about being in the business, when he's about to read, let him read.
Let me tell you something.
Story of your life.
Other than Kevin, I'm one of the most experienced podcasters in this room. There's another podcast that's represented in this room that didn't make it 8 episodes. So, Luke chapter 10.
Wow. That's an off-camera dig right there. Oh, no.
That's not right.
Oh,
That's
no.
for the game. It's going to come back.
Luke chapter 10, verse 38 says this.
Hey, when he's
I am off the rails.
Parker, let him
I
read.
am off the rails today. Sorry, guys.
While say welcome in again.
Yeah,
we just
While they were traveling, he entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary, who also sat at the Lord's feet and was listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted. That's me today. Martha was distracted by her many tasks, and she came up and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to serve alone? So tell her to give me a hand. The Lord answered her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary has made the right choice, and it will not be taken away from her.
Yeah, so kind of the general, this is the shorter text. We got to get into John chapter 11 here in a little bit. But like, this is really kind of us kind of seeing them interact with Jesus and see what some of that's like. And, you know, it's like anybody else, like companies come over to your house. If you're married, there's a good chance that you're polar opposites. One of you is like a clean freak and wanting to get everything just right. And the other one just wants to hang out with people. And both of them see what they're doing as the correct thing to do.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times when this gets interpreted, we have this idea of like, well, Martha's wrong for what she's doing. Like her working hard is not the problem in her story. Like the Bible actually commends us for working hard. Like
commands us to work
absolutely, hard. And has nothing to do with your compensation. Like it has everything to do with like, you're supposed to work hard because you're not working for earthly people. You are working for the Lord. So we work really hard. Like you in your job, you work really hard, and then people go, "Why do you work so hard?" And you go, "Man, or let's say somebody with like a minimum wage job, and you work really hard at it. People are like, why are you putting so much effort in? You're only getting paid minimum wage. It's because I'm not working for my compensation. I'm working for the Lord.
Okay, and so I was hoping you could elaborate just a little, although you kind of answered my question right there for people who are listening and they're like, yeah, but that's if you work for God directly. I just have a whatever job.
So
and
that's a great word, actually, because in Colossians chapter 3, it says whatever.
Yep, whatever you do.
Okay.
work unto the Lord.
Yeah.
So
what it's saying is like you're not working in response to the circumstances around you. You are working as a representation of who God is. And the whole point is when we work, let's say you work really hard at a job you don't quote unquote get paid well enough at.
Sure.
Somebody goes, "Why do you put that effort in?" And you go, "Well, I can tell you." And it's a vehicle for the gospel. Like I can go like, "Here's why I do it." It's to draw attention because I mean after all, the truth is no matter what you get paid, people that work hard and do it well in all of our jobs, in our life, in our home, in our neighborhood, in our school, they make life better around them.
Yeah.
And people want to be with them. And that gives an opportunity for telling people who God is and why do you why do you live the way you live? Like it's how you live out your faith. And so the point of this though is like some people like tend to think, well, like this is God going like you should just not work hard. And that's not the issue. The problem wasn't working hard. The problem was that she had distracted herself from Jesus. She also misidentifies the problem. She says, "Aren't you going to get on to Mary?" The problem in the story is also not Mary. The problem is her.
It feels like that has been a recurring theme already is frequently, not always, but frequently we run into people who they're not necessarily trying to be in open defiance of God. They're like, no, I'm doing what you told me to. And then Jesus is there like, you might not have it exactly right.
Yeah, we serve. I think a lot of times that happens, especially in the church world. You serve with, to a degree, good intentions, but you're missing Jesus in the process.
Yeah.
So part of, and Wes and I've had several conversations this week about this topic of like self-evaluation, self-reflection, like
self-awareness.
Yeah, just to be, are you aware? Like for her, she's very aware of what Mary is doing wrong.
Yeah.
She's unaware of what she's doing wrong. And yet the reality,
I guess the better way to say that is she's very aware of what she perceives Mary is doing wrong.
Right.
Because what Jesus
and she's very aware of what she perceives she's doing right.
Yeah, because Jesus is going to come in and go, Mary's got this right, and you don't.
Right.
So
can I ask kind of a personal question to expand on that?
Yeah.
In this day, at this time, in this space, I am frustrated with myself because I think I made a foolish mistake at work. Are there things, I know it's not directly here because you're talking about being self-aware. Can you be too self-aware and perhaps too harsh on yourself? And like, sometimes I have trouble forgiving myself.
Oh, yeah.
For something that I perceive that I have done wrong.
Well, I think you're doing a different self-word there, and I struggle with it also, and that's self-pity. So, like,
okay.
So there's and I kind of like that we're going off the rails because I think that's how conversations go sometimes. But like years ago, I came across this kind of idea, and it really changed how I looked at the word pride. So, pride, we tend to think of pride as somebody who's loud and boasting and arrogant, and certainly that is prideful. Sure. But pride is an unhealthy obsession with self. So when you live in a victim mentality or self-pity or wallowing, which I'm a really good wallower. Like when I'm like down, I can be a powder, that kind of stuff. Like that's a form of pride. I can be prideful on the low end or the high end. Am I obsessed with me instead of anything else? I think we all do it. You say something or do something, and then for the next 3 days, it's all that's rattling around in your head.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is why like humility in Scripture isn't defined as like putting yourself less than, but having a correct view of yourself. This is why like Christ is the perfect picture of humility, because he comes on earth, he humbles himself, and somehow he has this perfect view that he is God in the flesh and fully man.
Yeah.
And like that's why he's an ultimate picture of humility. It's not because Christ made himself less than everybody. He doesn't do that. He literally, I mean, he's going to raise somebody from the dead here in a few minutes in our conversation. So
in a few minutes he's going to do it?
Yeah, in our conversation, hopefully.
So pick up the pace.
But
yeah, man.
I think I would just say like that. I think that's the difference. It's like having a correct view of yourself. So I made a mistake at work, and I think the way I would respond to that is if it's a mistake and you need to like admit to it, confess it, move on, keep going. And if it's one that you can just like forgive, I don't know what it is. So like forgive yourself for, you go, Scripture says love covers a multitude of sins. Yeah. So like if I messed up, God's love will go. Yeah, it will be okay.
Yeah, that definition of humility I think is very important and applies here, which is kind of the antithesis of pride, and really does kind of tie into some of the Mary and Martha story, to be honest, where humility is not having a lower view of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's having an accurate view of yourself.
Okay.
So when you're looking at yourself going, man, I need to beat myself up for this, you're having a lower view of yourself. You're actually discounting the value that God has placed on your life. And so, like, to Wes's point, if it involves somebody else and you go, man, I think I said something, I screwed up, then the quickest release for that from you and from them is to go, hey, I screwed up and I really apologize. Okay. If it's just something you said and it applies only to you, then Wes is right. This is a conversation with you and God to go like, hey, I'm seeking your forgiveness. God's going, I'm already forgiven you. But then the hard work of our brain is letting ourself go. Yeah. Letting us release that. Yeah. And it's easier said than done. Sure. But we need to remember, like, when we're struggling to release ourselves from something we have done, God is not having the same struggle.
And then, sorry, I hope we can continue on this for just a second.
I'm good. I love this.
It is personally very fulfilling to me. The other thing, and I wonder if people listening to this kind of feel the same way, is like, I'll get to that point where I'll have that conversation with God, but then there'll be this little extra bit of, like, I don't know, guilt or whatever, that I'm like, why did it take so long? You know what I'm saying? So, like, instead of just saying, hey, good job, you had the tough conversation or whatever, I'll be like, hey, you had the tough conversation eventually. Like, what's the story? Why did it take so long? Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. Like, one, it's this is how Satan works. Like, you relieve one thing,
deception. So
he's going to deceive you into going, well, now you have another problem to deal with. Yeah. And when you resolve that, he's going to find another one, because Satan is, and this, I'll say this on the podcast, Satan's a butthole. So you can quote me on that. I don't know if we have but yeah, Satan, he's a liar, he's a deceiver, he's an enemy, he's an adversary, and he wants the worst for us. So he's going to continue to play with our minds like that and tempt us to believe these things, and we have to be willing to let go of them. And weirdly, this is kind of a picture of our story, because on one side you have somebody who is obsessed with, I need to do this, even though nobody asked for it. Like, Jesus didn't come in and go, yeah, we got to clean this place up. Yeah. Instead, you've got Mary who's sitting with Jesus, which is like, in our language, if I said, hey, I was sitting with Kevin, it just means we were hanging out. Yeah. But there's actually a deeper meaning in those words for them, because sitting with a rabbi meant certain things. And so, like, for you or for me, Wes, whoever, when you're going, like, I'm struggling with this issue in my life, what does it look like to sit with Jesus? It's not just, it's not just like, so to them,
Buddhism,
to sit at the feet of a rabbi, or in this case, sit at the feet of Jesus, implied that you were ready to accept and obey what he's teaching. It implied submission to Jesus. It also implied that my rebellion is done. Like, I'm no longer rebelling. So on one hand, you've got Mary sitting with Jesus going, my rebellion is done. I want to sit here and be with Jesus. And Martha, in that way, is doing the opposite, where she's going, I'm continuing in my rebellion. I'm going to be focused on me and not God, which is the heart of sin. And it also implies that your faith is in who Jesus is. Like, you're focused on discipleship. You're focused on love. So sitting with him is such a simple phrase, but it means so much more.
And so I know we don't always or frequently cross over with the messages every week at the church, but we're in the midst of a series, if I can recommend you guys go check it out, is about control freaks. Yep. And as soon as I saw the title of it going back a couple weeks, I was like, oh, okay, great. So this entire series should speak to me, because like that very much is. And so the last 2 weeks have been just super helpful as an aside, in addition to all of this, of like kind of getting another perspective on that.
I love a series like this. That was the title and kind of subtitle that our teaching team came up with. And then one of these days I'll let you read like my synopsis, because I like to write things in a very simple way. But it's such a practical series. And I thought I said this to Wes, and I don't say this to as any sort of like, it's a truthful statement for me, I guess is all I'm saying. I told Wes I thought it was the best message I've heard him preach, and I've heard him preach some outstanding messages.
Wow.
And so
that's very good.
Oh, I mean, that's not like, well, there's been a low bar and you did one great one. I view Wes as having an incredibly high bar, but I thought this was just incredible. But both weeks of it, it's like it's just so practical.
Yep.
Yeah.
We all struggle with it. We struggle with our words. We struggle with temptation.
And that's kind of what I wanted to bring this up is because, like, everything we're going through is great, but I just wanted to be like, hey, I'm in the midst of a practical struggle.
Yeah.
I would like to tell you.
Well, I mean, that's Mary and Martha. Martha's in a very practical struggle. Like, it's not a ridiculous thought. Like, somebody's coming over to your house. Like, God's coming to your house.
Sure.
Like, my wife cleans crazy if one of my kids' friends is coming over.
I do too.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
What were you going to say, Wes?
I think it's just like her struggle is representative in her mind, which I think is like just so my story. And I know, Jason, we've talked about this, is like some of your struggle. And like Jesus says in verse 41, you're worried about many things. And I think that is like just the kind of the crux of Martha's struggle is her brain is going, what about this and this and this and this and this and this and this? And there's all this stuff. And it's what we do, even if it's one situation, we play like a what if game. And like all of a sudden we're asking 50,000 questions that are never going to happen, that don't exist. And Jesus is going, there's one thing that's important.
Oh.
And your sister knows what it is. And that is sitting at the feet of Jesus and being willing to have the heart that Jesus has and learning from him. Yeah. And like, I think that's for me, when I was reading it today, I was just going, that's the thing I needed to hear, that stop focusing on the many. And the many is important, but the one thing is the most important. And sometimes we miss the forest through the trees, right? For the trees.
Yeah, I'll never forget talking to a lady years ago in our church, and she lost a child as a teenager. And she said, I spent so much of my life, and there's nothing wrong with having a clean house. I love having a clean house. But she said, I spent so much of my life in their later years of her teenage years, like yelling at her to clean her room, help around the house, do this, do that, because my primary objective was I needed a clean home so that if somebody came over, they didn't think less of me. And then she was like, and then I lost her, and I would give anything to have an unclean house again. And you realize in those moments where priorities land, because we can't. I do it all the time. It's not with cleaning necessarily. I mean, I love. Some of you guys know me, Wes. You know, I get obsessive about cleaning here at the office.
Lord have mercy.
But we'll
record it the next time it happens, folks. Put it out on the podcast.
But you see the other side of this in Mary, and not that Mary's a perfect person. She's had her own struggles.
She's gonna have her own struggle in the next story.
Right. So, but you see Mary, while one of these people is running around like crazy, Mary is getting criticized. I mean, Martha says it to Jesus. Mary is sitting at his feet. It's not like she didn't hear it. So, but Mary doesn't respond to the criticism. She relies, and this is a huge struggle for me, she relies on Jesus to defend her to her critic.
Because she's focused on the one thing.
Yes. But I sit there and go, I identify less with I like to have a clean house, but if my house looks a little lived in when somebody shows up, I'm okay with it. It doesn't bother me.
Did you live there?
But if you want to go, well, talk about the other thing, like do you feel the need, Jason, to jump up to justify yourself to your critics? I don't want to talk about that one as much.
Yeah, I get you on that.
It's like, can we get to John 11?
Right. But I mean, how hard is it? I mean, we've all had to do it. I've had to do it. To remain silent and let God defend you. Like, it's a weird thing that these guys have known. Like, what's one of my favorite quotes about character and reputation?
Oh, yeah. Like, you worry about your character, let God defend your reputation.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I like that.
You can't. We all have a somewhat public kind of life.
Sure.
We don't even know where or who we're being talked about by.
Yeah.
So you can't get into reputation management, but I can develop my character and trust that my character will go further than my reputation. So if somebody came to me and said, Wes was this and this and this to me, I'd be like, I'm sorry you had that experience, but also that's not the Wes I know.
Yeah.
His character defends him even though he's not present.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. That makes sense.
So we've kind of gone a little bit of all over the place, but I love it.
Yeah.
So this is kind of the interaction we have is and I like this. You went, and this is an old school movie reference, so I would have lost you in both cases. It's like an old City Slickers reference. It's like, they're like, what's the point of life? And the guy keeps going, one thing, and they don't know what their one thing is. But in this case, we know the one thing. It's like, focus on God.
Yeah. It's people say it about ministry all the time, like keep the main thing the main thing. And I think like just keeping that truth at the front of our life, that I think it would probably radically transform our thought life if we were just like, my focus is going to be what Jesus says and what he thinks about me.
Yeah.
Not what somebody on Twitter thinks about me or whatever. Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah. I mean, online, everybody's an expert at everything. Sure. It's pretty amazing.
Sarcasm, guys. You didn't catch that one.
But I've done this in counseling where I've people say I'm this, or I believe this about myself, or this about myself, or this about myself. And I go, okay, so those are identity statements. And like Wes and I talked about, Wes said this morning, or yesterday, I can't remember what it was, like we tend to make things identity issues that are never supposed to be identity issues.
Okay. Yeah.
But to go like, so if you went, well, I'm ugly and have no purpose, let's say it's something simple like that.
I am a disappointment.
Yeah. And you go, well,
yeah.
Do you flip that over to like, can you oppose that with a truthful statement from God? Psalm 139 says, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, that God designed us with a purpose, with an intent. Even before we were like formed in our mother's womb, he knew us, like all those kind of things. I'm unloved. We go back to our Nicodemus one, John 3:16, for God so loved the world. And you go, that's the true statement. So I need to hang on to the true statement, but we often spend so much time hanging on to the lie.
Yeah, I think that's another thing before we jump to John 11 that I see in Martha. She asks a question that starts with 3 words that we're actually going to see show up again in John 11. Lord, don't you care?
Yeah.
So there's almost a question of like the character of who God is, who Jesus is in this moment. Like, and she should know. They're friends.
Yeah.
It's like, Lord, don't you care about this? And like, we're going to see this phrase again in the next story. Like, if you would have been here.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think just being reminded that like when we put ourselves in the position to question God's motivation or God's character, we're in the wrong.
Because, don't you think it happens because people think if it doesn't go the way you personally think it should go, that means it went against you, as opposed to like, well, that's the way it was always supposed to go. You just don't have the bigger picture idea yet.
100%.
Yeah, we think we are in control.
Yeah.
For sure.
But the truth is,
week
like 4,
the
real,
by the way.
week 4 of the series. I mean, the root of it is like that we would never say out loud is, if I was God, I would have done it different.
Yeah.
Like that's the root of control. So.
Yeah. I mean, if I was God, there would be some smiting that would happen at times. Like, because I would not be a good God because I'm an idiot.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah. So I'm grateful that God is God, even though in my own foolishness, I still question his perfection.
Yep. God is good at his job.
He's very good at his job.
Yeah.
And they're not taking applications.
Nope.
He's been the employee of the month forever.
Right.
Great line.
Good job.
That's good. Yeah, well said.
All
right.
John
So
11 next.
we've been introduced to them a little bit, to the sisters. Now we're going to meet the brother. You ready?
We're not gonna read the whole thing. It's 45 verses.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna do my best at summarizing, and you can just like butt in whenever you want.
Sure.
So, John chapter 11. If you didn't listen to last week's podcast, you should, because there's a big intro to who John is, and that's super important to this story also.
Yep. We're starting at 1, so 1 through 44.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify in case anyone's like, I'm reading my Bible.
There you go.
I hope you are reading your Bible.
Yes.
John 11:1. We get, now a man was sick, Lazarus from Bethany.
Stop. So,
I thought we were going to summarize the whole story. And then,
well, you said stop me when you want to.
Yeah, I was just meant in the story, but we can do it this way.
Well, just to go like, they're just little nuggets I'll throw in. I'm not going to stop you for long, but like Lazarus is the Greek form of the name Eleazar, so it means God is my help. So like there's this guy that is interesting with what's going to happen, that his name literally means God is my help. When I'm helpless, God is my help. Okay.
So then the sisters, Mary and Martha, are going to send a message to Jesus that Lazarus is sick. The way they're going to say that is, Lord, the one that you love is sick. When Jesus heard it.
It's interesting to me they don't ask for help.
Yep.
They just tell him what's like, here's the situation. They don't ask for healing. They just notify him.
Yep. So Jesus gets the news, and it's probably my favorite verse in the text. He stays 2 more days in where he was, and we'll get back to that and why that is. But then there's kind of this interaction between Jesus and the disciples that they don't understand what Jesus is saying. They're like, he says, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm on my way to wake him up. And then it says, they thought he was speaking about natural sleep, so Jesus is just like, no, guys, he's dead. Like, that's the whole conversation.
Yeah. So just to go back on some of that, like, it's interesting what you find here, because you can misinterpret some things about Jesus if you're not careful. Mary and Martha express a need. They send a message that they don't ask for healing, but they make him aware that somebody you love is struggling. And Jesus' response is delay.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound loving.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
And Jesus is going to say in verse 4, this sickness will not end in death, but is for the glory of God, which is interesting because when Jesus says it, Lazarus is already dead. So he's declaring already, this isn't going to last. And it's very important if you go, this doesn't sound very loving. Verse 5 is very clear to go, Jesus loved Martha, her sister, and Lazarus. Like, so you can't read into the motivation like this is uncaring. He's playing chess and we're playing checkers.
Yeah.
There's a whole other thing, and he's alluding to it right here. Why are you smiling?
Because we were supposed to sum up the whole story and come back to this.
I know.
You knew that was. You knew this is how it was going to happen.
About it.
Well, and you just brought up something that we talked about maybe 2 weeks ago when we did the podcast from the dungeon. Is I also fall into go watch the video, people. I also fall into the trap sometimes of taking things too literally. So when you said like the people literally thought he meant sleep, like I am asleep versus dead, that is very relatable to me.
Yeah. The delay is confusing to the disciples, and it's probably pretty agonizing to Mary and Martha. Like it's rough. But in the Gospel of John, there's 3 different times where he is going to show evidence that he's doing things on God's timing, not on man's. Like there are 3 different times where he's going to delay doing something, but every time it's so that in the story there is a greater glory that God is going to get to. And so it's really important that we understand that. He has to go to Judea, by the way, to do this. When he finally goes, which is kind of what the part Wes is getting into, Judea is a very dangerous place. Like these people want to kill him. Like it's not good. And I loved you said this one a minute ago. Jesus gives his disciples when they're confused this like really weird sentence. If anyone walks during the day, he doesn't stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks during the night, he does stumble because the light is not in him. It's very, it almost feels Yoda-ish, like where you're like, what is this wisdom? It's like
Star Wars, right?
Yes, Star Wars. That's right. No, he's a Decepticon. Anyway, it's filled with midi-chlorians. So
once you finish this point, my challenge for you is going to be let Wes summarize the rest, and then we'll go back chunk by chunk.
Yeah, listen, if you want
he
to
stole my thunder about waiting, so like I'm.
Well, go into
no,
it.
heck no, we'll keep going.
Well, no, I was going to move on to something else. So go ahead.
So we'll stop here, and then we'll get to the end of the story later because there's a lot here. I think sometimes we just miss God in the waiting.
Yeah.
And like you think about like Mary and Martha. There's a verse later on in verse 18 is going to remind us that Bethany is near Jerusalem. So they send a message to Jesus. He's 2 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
That's a half an hour walk.
Yeah.
And
slowly.
Right. That's a half an hour west walk is what I was saying. But there's something that happens in the waiting and that Jesus is doing. And I think it's a discipleship tool. And I was at a conference last week and I bought a book. It's called My Heart Cries Out, Gospel Meditations for Everyday Life by Paul David Tripp.
Here it is, name dropping. Let's go.
This is called Why I Hate to Wait.
Okay.
So I was just going to share this because I think we struggle to wait and struggle to see, kind of to your point, that God is on a different clock than we are.
Yeah.
And I just love how Paul David Tripp writes. The counseling team would say that I'm a Paul David Tripp fanboy, but I'm okay with that. So it goes like this. It's a little long, but I think it was helpful to me. I hate to wait. I have places to go. I have people to see. I have things to do. I love me, and I have a wonderful plan for my life. I hate to wait. I don't like obstacles in my way, people that disagree, or processes that take too long. I hate to wait. I don't like lines or traffic or delayed appointments or tardy people. I hate to wait. I wake up every day with an agenda. I know what I want to accomplish. I know how I want it done. I know where I want it done. I know when I want it done. I know who I want to do it. I know why it has to be done this way. I hate to wait because I'm the only one having to wait. I don't mind that you have to wait, but I don't want to have to wait with you. I hate to wait because I tend to put myself in the one place I am never supposed to be, and I tend to want to be one thing I should never crave to be. I hate to wait because I want to be in the center of my universe, and I want to be my own sovereign. When I forget your plan, when I lose sight of your will, when I begin to think that my life belongs to me, when I fall prey to the delusion that I am wiser than you and my way is better than yours, then I hate to wait and I curse the obstacles in my way. But you are sovereign, and you are good and loving and gracious and kind and mighty and filled with compassion and overflowing with mercy. You bought me with the price of your Son. You forgave me, and the cost was his death. For all my attempts at independent wisdom and self-sovereignty, the truth is that my life does not belong to me. So once more I fall to my knees. Once more I open my hands and give my life back to you and say, you do with, in and through me, what you think is best, and I will follow. And when your wisdom and grace require it, I will be willing to wait. And for me, I was just going, that sums up me.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine the pain of waiting for, like Mary and Martha, one of their best friends is God in the flesh.
Yeah.
And they send a message and like, hey, our brother is dead. He is dying. Can you get here? And then in the silence, like there's nothing.
Yeah.
It's not like you like texted them back and was like, thumbs up, be there in 2 days. They got nothing.
Yeah.
And then Jesus shows up later and does something miraculous. But
Yeah.
I just think it's a good reminder.
That was
When they're in that waiting, like the disciples are questioning the timing. And Jesus says, are there not 12 hours in the day? Like of light is what he's saying, which is 24 hours in a day. And I was looking into that statement, and there's a couple of different interpretations, but the most common is what Jesus is saying is essentially, for what I want to do, there is still plenty of time.
Yep.
And so that weird sentence he says to them where he says, you can navigate by day because the light is out and you don't stumble, but you stumble in the darkness because there's no light in you. What he's saying is you have human eyes and you are seeing with human wisdom. And so when the sun is out, you can find where you want to go. Your worldly wisdom can get you around. When the darkness hits and things are difficult, you don't understand how to take the next step because the light is not in you. And the external light that you've been using has been turned off.
Yeah.
And so he basically what he's saying is you're seeing things with human eyes and in the waiting, and I'm seeing things with divine eyes. I see something you don't see, and there's plenty of time for me to do what I want to do.
Yep, which is why the statement that Jesus loves them preceding that he waited is so important.
Yeah.
Because the most loving thing Jesus does here is he doesn't come right away. And like just thinking about that through my circumstances, my perspective on life, the things that I want, talked about desires a lot on Sunday, being reminded that sometimes God seemingly not moving, or maybe literally not moving, which is what happens in here, is actually God's love for me. Maybe he wants to do something bigger. Maybe he wants to show me more glory. Maybe he's protecting me, but I don't see it that way. So it's just a reminder that in the waiting, God is often doing way more than we think.
And he's growing us.
Yep.
And this may sound like a dumb analogy, but like you think about, like for me, like I always struggle with weight loss. If I could lose weight in an instant, I would eat unhealthy every day.
Yeah. You didn't learn anything. You
Right. Didn't have to go through any of the work.
Yeah.
So I didn't learn anything from the process. As you continue down in the text, at one point, they've started to buy into the idea of like, well, maybe the reason he's waiting is because it's not as bad as we thought. He's just asleep. They go into that kind of picture. And I love the thing that is said, because Jesus said, so he told them plainly, Lazarus has died. And then the next statement, I am glad that I wasn't there.
Yeah.
Now that sounds pretty ugly. But the only way you can say that, and the only reason he does say that, he literally goes on and says, so that you may believe. Like, he's certain of a different outcome than what they're expecting.
Yeah, and I think what you continue to see, I'm going to move us along a little bit here, but like, is they still don't get it. So they have this whole interaction of Jesus like, you don't get it. So like, your friend, he's dead.
Yeah.
And we're glad about it because I'm about to do something crazy. And Thomas is like, great, let's go with him. We're going to die too.
Yes, I was just looking.
But it's like,
just on that. That's in 16.
Yeah.
Line 16.
Thomas, everybody you either have one of these people in your life or friend group, or you are the person. You have the pessimist in your group.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like, man, you've seen this guy do so much stuff, and a guy just died, and he's like, wait for it. It's about to get good. And like, you still don't have the faith that he's about to like blow the doors off your brain. And like, I don't know. To me, it's frustrating, but then I go, I do it all the time.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to do a miracle. Great. Let's all go get killed. That's Thomas.
Yeah.
all right. So this is where it gets fun. If it hasn't gotten fun yet. So Jesus arrives. He found, which by the way, this word here is really funny because Jesus already knows. But he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days.
As if that was a new discovery.
Yeah, it was not the found here is not a discovery word.
Yes. I've always read past this. So I did something I don't normally do on the podcast. I worked on it last week.
Just kidding.
So no, it's for real.
Yeah, that's the
So
word.
I'm kidding.
I started looking into this beyond what I already knew in my own head. Like, I mean, I'm pretty familiar with the Bible. I've preached on these things.
Yeah.
But I was like, every once in a while, I was like, when I find something specific, my brain goes, have you ever dug into this? Why? Because I find that there's details in the Bible usually have a meaning. So like, why is it why couldn't he just been he'd been there for several days? Why 4? Is there any significance? So I looked at this, and the Jewish superstition. Or did you get this? I'd not heard this.
You can cover it. I'll just say at a youth conference when I was a kid, there was this quartet that always sang this song called 4 Days Late.
Yeah.
And there was just like right before this guy, there was a guy that came up and explained what I think you're about to say.
So the Jewish superstition was that the soul stayed in the grave with the body for 3 days.
Oh.
Hoping that the body would come back to life. So after 4 days,
So he's dead.
the Jews have gone, there's no hope of resurrection.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
You just mentioned something. You talked about doing additional research. I know what I've learned. I'm really intrigued. Do you guys feel like you have learned new things along the way? Because you're like, I got to look at this from a different perspective. Okay.
There's not any time that I read the Bible that I don't feel like matter of fact, one of my, the guys around here have heard me say this, but like when I'm preaching, one of the things that I try to work on is getting to something that I go, that feels fresh to me.
Okay.
Because if I'm going, ooh, that was exciting to hear from my own ears.
Yeah.
That was something new. And it's not always like a new
It's not a new concept.
It's not always a new concept, but it's like this new way of thinking about a concept that I can go, oh, okay. When I feel like I've learned something, then I feel like I've started to do an adequate amount of preparation.
Yep.
All right, keep going.
So Jesus shows up. He's not quite to the village yet.
Yeah.
Martha, not shocking based on the last story, she is ready to find him.
Yep.
So she is looking for him, and she finds Jesus. She's like, Lord, and we'll get back to this statement in a minute, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. And then Jesus is going to kind of quote back to her one of the most famous verses of Scripture in verse 25, I am the resurrection and the life. And essentially Martha's response is like, yeah, my brother's dead. Like that. I mean, that's kind of her position about it. And then you see,
Can I? Quick question before you.
Sure.
When she says, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day," is that? It kind of feels like she's saying, "Yeah, I know you're going to tell me like he's going to go to heaven or whatever, but like I want him here now." Is that?
That's how I read it, but
okay.
You might read it differently.
Well, so a couple things here. First of all, for John, like we've talked about in the non-synoptic Gospel of John. So the other three Gospels do not include this story. And the reason they don't include the story is that most of their encounter comes through the lens of Peter. So Mark is the scribe and translator for Peter. Mark is probably written first. Matthew and Luke use it as a launching point to remember everything else, and they kind of write similarly. John doesn't write from that perspective. So John writes a very different. We talked about this again a little bit last week, but one of the things is like there's 7 I am statements in the Gospel of John that are huge. This is the 7th.
Okay.
The I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? And like we talk about this, like Romans, when we baptize, it's really this picture in the New Testament. If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, which is what Jesus just said, I am this, and believe in your heart God raised him from the dead, you shall be saved. And he's basically like presenting a form of the gospel, right here.
No, not a form. This is the gospel. Yeah. I'm the resurrection and the life.
And yet, what I love about Martha here is she's super disappointed that Jesus is late. Like, she's clear about it. She is not confident anything good is going to happen. But at the same time, she still says, I believe in you as the Messiah. Yep. I think that's such a relatable thing. To go, I know that God can do miraculous things, and I still believe in him.
Yeah.
But I am disappointed he hasn't done what I thought he was going to do.
Yeah, he hasn't, the way we said this before, is like he hasn't answered all my questions. I haven't made sense of my life. I have no idea what's going on here. I don't know why my brother died, but I trust in Jesus as Lord.
His next encounter is going to be with Mary, and I'll let Wes kind of summarize it, but like when Jesus asked for her, it says, the teacher is here and calling for you. And when it says calling for you, like that's a command to come. Like, in other words, don't waste any more time. Get to me. And that's where we pick up in verse 29.
Yeah, so Mary heard this. She gets up quickly, goes to Jesus. So the interesting thing here is Mary goes to Jesus, sees him, and there's a key phrase here that you saw in the first story, fell at his feet. So here we go again, kind of similar undertones. And then, Lord, get the same statement, Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. When Jesus saw her crying and the Jews who had come with her crying, he was deeply moved in his spirit and troubled. Where have you put him? Lord, they told him, come and see. Jesus wept, which is the shortest verse in Scripture, but also one of the most powerful.
Yeah.
And I think we say this every week, but here, talk about sad verses in Scripture. This is verse 36. So the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, couldn't he who opened the blind man's eyes also kept this man from dying? Yeah. So we can stop there for a minute because there's a lot there.
Yeah. What were you saying?
No, I was just going to say, so it very much feels like, kind of passive aggressive in terms of like, oh yeah, that's great that you're crying, but you didn't care enough to save him to prevent the crime.
Yeah. Yeah. There's 2 different kinds of like approach to mourning from Mary and Jesus here. And I think you're going to see this response. I don't know if we're going to get into it, but Wes talked about the difference in Martha and Mary, and we may get to that as well. But in this part we just read, one of the things that I think is really great is it's very clear that Jesus was moved with compassion because of his love for them.
Yep. Splank needs amai in the Greek.
There you go. So even
Move
though
from your insides, literally what it means.
Even though he knows what's going to happen, he's hurting that they're hurting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that. So he's like, he knows full, like it would have been like the human part of me would have been like, chill out.
Yeah.
I'm working on something.
RELAX.
Right. Relax.
Sorry.
Shout out to Mr. Rogers. So when he does it, I just love the concept that because I believe this about God. God is moved with compassion. Even when he's going, you have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But I hurt that you hurt. But there are 2 different words here when Mary weeps and when Jesus weeps. So in the text we just read, Mary's going to have some tears. So in their culture, they would actually hire mourners. Like, the more loud wailing there was, it declared the significance of the dead person. So there was all of this loud, and Mary's tears are, the word that's being used is this like loud wailing, groaning, out of control.
Yeah.
When Jesus weeps, it is a different word. It is a quiet weeping. He's moved, but he's not out of control. Like he is very much in control of the situation. And then when it says he groaned in his spirit, it says Jesus saw him cry. Oh, sorry, let me find the right place. Right, yeah, he was deeply moved, is the way the CSB says it. Deeply moved in his spirit and troubled. That word is, so the original word is the snorting of a horse, and it is not a depiction of sadness. It's a depiction of anger.
That is what I thought.
Yeah. So what is he angry at? If you had to guess.
I'm not sure.
So there's a lot of back and forth on this. He's not angry at Mary and Martha. Nope. And some people think that his anger is at the mourners. But the most likely interpretation of this is that he's angry at death. He might be angry at Satan, but death is ultimately the enemy of all humanity. And so he's angry at death. As a matter of fact, it's not going to be very long from this where he is going to go and take the sting and the power of death away from it. He's going to go and be crucified, and the Bible says that he removes the sting and the pain of death. He is angry at the condition of sin and what sin does to us. If sin doesn't exist, Lazarus isn't in this state. If sin doesn't exist, his friends aren't hurting. His anger is at what sin has done to the world.
Wow.
That's good. I didn't know that. That's really cool. So if you were curious, if you ever learned things.
Yeah.
So it's me learning.
That's a
right
yes,
now.
yeah.
I'll let you pick up from where we're at.
Yeah, so
Sure.
we'll talk about, it's like from Counseling Wes a little bit. So you have Jesus gets asked within 10 verses, he gets asked the same question twice by two different people, two radically different responses. So Martha comes to Jesus. Jesus, if you would have been here, my brother wouldn't have died. And he's like, I am the resurrection and the life. Do you believe this?
Yeah.
And yes, and in that moment, you might believe based on things like if she's actually living in rebellion still those kind of things, like she comes to faith in that moment.
Yeah.
But then Mary, who up until this point, we have gotten a picture of Mary that she's sitting at Jesus' feet. She has obviously deep care for Jesus and the things that he cares about. She asked the same question. Lord, if you would have been here, my brother wouldn't have died. And he sits with her, weeps with her, and consoles her and comforts her. And I think it's a good lesson for us, especially if you're like in a position where, to be honest, if you're a believer, the Bible commands us to weep with those who weep, rejoice with those who rejoice. So when you are mourning with other people or you're around grieving people, I think we are responsible to know what our response should be. Yeah. Jesus is the God of the universe. And he knew Martha needed truth. She needed words. They were words of encouragement. They were words of life. And Mary needed someone to not say anything and to sit with her and weep with her. Yeah. I think it's probably too bold of a statement. There's a whole lot of damage that comes when we do it the wrong way.
Oh, yeah.
When we can damage grieving people. We can damage people that are, in those moments, people are questioning their faith. And we can say some really dumb things when people are grieving, when really what they needed was somebody to weep.
Yeah.
And then other times, people need truth, and we withhold it because we're afraid we might offend them or we're afraid we might hurt them.
Yeah.
But the Holy Spirit is going, they need to hear this.
Yep.
So I think that's what, and we're going to talk about this in the summer series, not to connect it to everything we do on Sunday mornings, but that's the power of like walking with the Spirit of God and being familiar with his voice to be able to hear it, to know what to do. Because some of it's personality, but also some of it is circumstantial. And you kind of know it's personality in this case, because Martha's a go-getter and Mary is more of a feeler.
So in the story, not to take Wes's summary job, but what's going to happen at this point after all this is Jesus is going to basically say, man, it is time.
Yeah.
And he's going to say, we're going to roll this stone away. And you got to love the response that he gets, which is they're like, no.
He smells bad.
He stinketh.
But then Jesus fires back, kind of specifically, do you not remember what we just talked about?
Yeah.
Like a minute ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's hard to know, like, well, it's not hard to know. He's talking to Martha, but it's like the disciples are watching this too, and it's like, what is happening here? Like, somebody just stand up and go, guys, we know he's going to raise him from the dead.
Yeah.
He's told us 3 times he's the resurrection in this story, but it doesn't happen that way. So
well, it's the same with us. And God tells us stuff all the time. We miss the point. But so he's at this point. They're gonna roll the stone away, and then Jesus is gonna pray, and then he's gonna shout with a loud voice because dead people are hard of hearing. So you've got to get really loud if you're gonna have them hear you.
I think he's going to be loud for a different reason.
Why is that?
That's in verse 42.
Okay.
I know that you always hear. He's talking to his father. He says, Father, I thank you that you heard me. I know that you always hear me. But because of the crowd standing here, I said this so that they may believe you sent me. And I just wrote down this sentence. Jesus' public ministry is an overflow of his private relationship with the Father. Like, you just have this moment where he's talking to God like it's just them because he's done that before.
Yeah.
He's like, God, I know you always hear me, but I'm going to be really loud.
Yep.
So that all these people may come to know you because of what you're about to do.
They also had magicians and wizards that were basically like con men, and they would do incantations. When they would do it, they would whisper and mutter words. Jesus is going, this isn't a magic trick. I'm going to declare this boldly. And Jesus prophesied this kind of stuff would happen, both here and ultimately in the grave for all of us. In John chapter 5, verse 28, Jesus prophesies that those who are in the grave would hear his voice. So he's going to say that six chapters earlier.
Now, if ever there were a line that Jason is well suited to read in the full fever of the Bible,
Lord,
I feel like
have
it's line.
Lazarus,
I feel like it's line.
come forth. There you go.
You knew he was going to jump on that if you read it normal.
Well, he already did. He took my job for this section. This is the best part of the story, and it's like, Wes, he can't do this part. So, no, I'm just kidding.
Not true.
Can you tell us why he said Lazarus? Not just he didn't.
No,
just say,
you got to bring
he
it.
didn't
This
just
is an
say,
old
"Come
preacher
forth."
joke.
Yeah,
But it's true. I think it's true.
I think it's true too. The reason he says Lazarus come forth and not just come forth is because if he just says come forth, every dead body within 500 miles is coming out of the grave.
Oh, yeah. That's going to be problematic, I'm sure.
Yeah. I got to imagine there's another guy named Lazarus, like 4 cities over. Maybe he jumped out of a grave.
Different names in the Bible. Like, in the Old Testament there are, but like we get into a point where like, which one is that?
Yeah. I would love to like get up in heaven and be like, who's that guy? That's Lazarus. The one that raised from the dead? Yeah, not the one we wrote about, though. Yeah. This was another dude. He was about 4 cities over. Yeah. His wife freaked out.
Which makes sense.
That's the dumbest thing. This is a crazy verse.
Yep.
The dead man came out bound, hand and foot, with linen strips.
So hopping.
Yeah. There's parts of this that are funny because it's like a mummy just walked out of the grave.
I think what Jesus says is kind of funny too.
And,
yeah.
Yeah. And with his face wrapped in a cloth. So he has no idea where he's walking. He's just walking. Jesus said to them, unwrap him and let him go.
I like just the way that setup is humorous, and I know it's not a humorous situation, but
no, it's an awesome situation.
Okay.
Oh gosh.
And it sounds like, I mean, he looks mummified in that moment, and so very simplistically, Jesus like, there you go, unwrap him.
Yeah.
Like it's just a normal thing that just happened.
A couple of things. One, and this is just my Jason brain, but I go, was Lazarus ticked? Like if he's dead, the Bible says to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. So he goes from a place of paradise for 4 days, and you're like, you brought me back here? Like jokingly, you want to go, Lazarus, come forth, and you just hear back, no. Like, I mean,
I get it.
You know what I'm saying? But
I've never thought about it.
I
like
also
that.
love the idea of unwrap him and let him go. Like the more literal translation is loose him. Like he's bound. Loose him and let him go. Yeah. And I think the reality of that is Jesus does in this moment, and this is part of how the ministry works. Jesus does the part only Jesus can do, and then allows us to do a part that we're able to help with, so that we get to participate in the ministry and in the message of the gospel.
Okay.
In the ministry of the gospel to somebody. And so, because he could have just as easily said, come out, and he came out clothed in new clothes. Like it could have happened that way. but he doesn't. He allows for participation on our part. Go ahead, Wes. You look like you had something to say.
I didn't, but I can. I think it's just another moment. Like, technically the story starts in 44, but stops in 44. But it doesn't really, because right after this is therefore, so it's connected.
Yeah.
Many of the Jews who came to Mary and saw what he did believed in him. So, like, this is what the reason Jesus calls out in verse 42, so that other people would see and believe it happens. But then, again, sad verse, some of them went to the Pharisees. And what you're going to see here, and I don't know that I had ever made this connection directly, is like, this is going to kind of start the process of killing Jesus.
100%.
Like, he raises a guy from the dead, and then they're like, we got to kill him, which is a crazy response.
Yeah, if I could go a little bit deeper in that, you get these incredible reactions. You just mentioned both of them. One, for people that want to be filled with faith, their reaction is they believed. Again, you go back to that Romans passage, confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart God raised him from the dead, you shall be saved. But then you get worry and fear from the religious leaders, which causes them to respond very differently in verses 46 through 48. Charles Spurgeon has this quote about this moment. He says, "This is some of the meanest conduct that has ever been recorded in human history."
Yep.
And the reason he says that is because at first the Jews are so they just watched it. They know the guy's been dead for 4 days.
Yeah.
They are 100% that this was a miracle that only God can do.
4 days. That's the whole point.
It's past the Jewish days, like, where it could happen. So this is divine. They oppose Jesus at first because they are unconvinced he's the Messiah. Now they're going to oppose Jesus because they're completely convinced he's the Messiah.
Yeah, and he has to go. Short term, I'm sorry for
no, you're good.
jumping
You're
in
good.
there. It's interesting. I know bigger picture why he gets crucified, but it is interesting to see, like, hey, he rose up Lazarus, and he's like, I'm going to take your place. Like, I am going to die.
Oh, yeah.
You are going to live.
Yeah, I mean, that's all of our story, right? Yeah. Lazarus comes out of a grave. Jesus goes into one so we can come out of one.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you've got in this, they fear him so much that they're like, if we let this get out, everybody's going to believe.
And they don't need us anymore.
Exactly.
That's the heart of it, right? Like,
I like that.
They go, these people have needed us for their religion and their connection to God. And if they find out that this guy's the Messiah, we are no longer needed.
Yeah. John names names. He says who's doing this. It's a guy named Caiaphas. Caiaphas is going to be known for a lot of things. He is one of the people that pays Judas when Judas betrays Jesus. And he saw him raise a dead man. He's going to be the one that oversees the Sanhedrin that condemns Jesus to die. Not only is he going to be overseeing the Sanhedrin, I did this message on Easter, when they meet in a courtyard, when Peter is around a charcoal fire denying Jesus, they're at Caiaphas's house. So he knows when he's accused, he's not in the dark going, man, I hope we're getting this right.
Yeah.
He knows he's wrong.
But this is the way to keep his power?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
he's like, his life brings danger to our prerogatives and agenda, so I vote for death.
That's so good. So what happens to Lazarus?
Yeah, so we came out of a tomb. It was very Walking Dead. Have you seen zombie movies?
Yes.
No. So the truth is, like, one of the things that I think is interesting in Scripture, and I would really want to ask this question of Lazarus, is what did happen for those 4 days?
Sure.
The Bible doesn't give us any indication.
Because you weren't asleep. Jesus is very clear about that. So.
Yeah.
Right.
One of the things that is interesting here is that some people read verse 50 that not just, it's kind of like a hit on somebody, not just that they want to take out Jesus, but potentially want to take out Lazarus, the Pharisees. Like, they can't deny the miracle happened. Too many people saw it. So now we've got to destroy the evidence.
Yeah.
It says in verse 50, when people are conflicted, they're like, you're not, Caiaphas says, you're not considering it is to your advantage that one man should die for people rather than a whole nation perish. Some people think he may not at that point yet have been talking about Jesus. He might have been talking about Lazarus. We can't let this dead guy that's come back to life go walking free. Now, I don't know for sure which one he was addressing, but like, they knew they couldn't stop the truth from spreading, so they had to kill the truth. When it comes to Lazarus, like we don't know a lot more. Sure. There are some, it's not mythology, but I guess some kind of suggestions about what could have happened, but nobody knows for sure. Like some people say that he moved to Cyprus, which is like an island off the southern coast of Turkey today.
It's like mine and Caitlin's like dream vacation spot.
Is it really?
Oh. Yeah, we talk about it all the time.
Okay. Some people believe that he moved there, became a bishop, and then ultimately died of natural causes.
What is that based on?
It's church history, lore, whatever. Yeah. Some people believe that he moved
oral
to
tradition.
Right. Some people believe that he moved to Gaul, which is like an area of modern-day France, that he became a bishop there and ultimately was beheaded under an evil emperor there. We don't know. What we do know, what we can surmise, is that he's going to die a second time.
Yeah.
Because everybody dies. So his physical body is not going to live on. And wherever he hung out for 4 days, he gets to go back to. Because he's not going to miss his reward for the story. But I don't know. We talk about this whole podcast is I Met Jesus, and in this you see so many people meeting Jesus, and you see such differing responses.
Yep.
For some that met Jesus, this drove them into deep faith, and they saw miraculous things, and for other, the truth of Jesus made them worse. And the truth is, we see that today. Like when you want to live in rebellion, and we all have wanted to, we all struggle with wanting to, but when you want rebellion more than you want the truth, you'll do anything to kill the truth. And I think we live in a world and a culture where there is an attempt to kill Christianity constantly. But it's survived 2,000 years since this happened, and it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, I think the other encouragement I would have, because we kind of wrap up, is like, Jesus is a God who brings dead things back to life. Yep. So, like, if you're listening to this, you go, man, my marriage is dead. Or, man, my addiction is draining me, and it's causing, death in my life. Sunday, we talked about death as the idea of separation. So, like, that you feel separated from things. I would just challenge you to latch onto this truth. He is the resurrection and the life. Like, his desire for your life is life. Like, he didn't die on the cross and rise again so that we could walk through misery and one day hope to be in heaven. Yep. Like, he wants to give us resurrection and life.
Yeah. Even if you happen to say something dumb at work, and you struggle with it, you don't have to live in that. And we do. We go and like, I mean, metaphorically, I just want to crawl in a hole and die. Like, I just, I want to disappear. I don't want to have to face this. That even for those things, like, he is the resurrection and the life. So many things want to take our life from us, both literally and spiritually. They want to take the wind out of our sails, draw us away from what God's calling us to, drawing us away from the abundant life. And honestly, the joyful life. I'm working on a sermon right now for several weeks from now on joy, and just God is the God of joy, and we are called to live in joy. And everything that the enemy does, even the stuff that looks good, ultimately is designed to ensnare you and steal that joy. And that's not what this is supposed to look like. We are attached to Jesus, who is the resurrection and the life, real living, real life. And he's the only way.
That's good.
I think fantastic work by you two gentlemen today. I know we switched up a little bit here and there, but very good job.
I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing your own stuff. I think that's such a real thing that all of us struggle with, and I think it's good.
And I feel like it's only fair.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to show up here and be like, well, that's great for everyone who has problems. Not me, though. Like, everything is A-okay. All right, we will catch everybody next week, or if you're behind, in like 5 seconds when you just move on to the next episode on the Crossroads Podcast.